It's the first day of 2025, and it's time that I knock off a narrative that I see gaining more steam, but I think is a tad bit overblown. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Bon année, mes amis. Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. May I say, it took me way too many takes to knock off Happy New Year's, my friends, in French, but it was worth it. But we're going to wrap up today's episode with something I want to see more of in this new calendar year. In segment 2, we're going to look at what I believe is an underrated or at least under-discussed transfer to Hampton from a former Division II quarterback. But I want to kick this whole thing off. I want to start off 2025 the right way. And I think we need to leave some things in last year. That's the whole cliche about the new year, right? We got resolutions. We got things we want to leave in 2024. And one of the things that I want to leave in 2024 is false narratives. I know it won't happen, but I'm going to do my best to not feed into it. The false narrative that I want to address today is that the NFL to HBCU pipeline that people are referring to, and no, that doesn't mean over the 50-year history or nothing like that. We're talking about in the last 5 years. This NFL to HBCU pipeline that people talk about is overhyped. We overblown how often that this happens. I've seen the irritation on a repeated basis. And quite frankly, I'm going to say it's a false narrative because people put out the image as if NFL players with little experience are coming over and dominating the coaching landscape in the HBCU landscape. I don't agree with this. Matter of fact, I think it's overblown. I think that we see a few of them. And yeah, Deshaun Jackson makes a lot of noise. Michael Vick makes a lot of noise. Eddie George makes a lot of noise. Deion Sanders makes a lot of noise. But that's where the list really stops. Let's throw Eddie Robinson in there because I think he deserves to be in that conversation sometimes. And no, I'm not throwing him in there because he's an Alabama State guy. So I'm going to take that off the table. It wasn't one that made a lot of noise. It was a guy coming back to his alma mater to be a head coach. That's what it was. I'm not here to say that it doesn't happen. I'm not here to say that it's not frequently discussed or on the table. But what I am here to say is that when I see the reaction to this, it feels exaggerated, in my opinion. It does not feel like this dominating force. I named 4 guys, 5 if you include Eddie Robinson Jr. Name 5 guys that have gone from the NFL to the HBCU landscape with little known coaching experience. You had Prime, he coached on the high school level. Deshaun Jackson coached on the high school level this past season. But still, I would say small resume for Jackson, a little bit bigger of a resume for Sanders. But it's not expansive, and it's probably not what many people would have thought a head coach would have had he not been who he was, right? Talking about name, status, and notoriety and things of that nature. But okay, we can acknowledge it happens. You can acknowledge that it exists, but let's not sit here and act as if all these schools are going this route. That's not the case. What happens is every time a job becomes vacant, people are talking about it. You're hearing more clamoring from the side that opposes you than actual action or the actual action of what you oppose. That's a better way to put it. When people get all up in arms about this, the frequency, let me say that. I think that's the important thing because it's perception versus reality. And when we start talking about how frequently something happens, I don't think it happens frequently enough for us to have the angry outrage and discourse that we have on a regular basis. right? Like Ed Reed did not get the Alabama A&M job. But because he was connected to it and seemed heavily connected to it, I feel like it perpetuates and furthers this narrative that's not true, right? Like Reed was at Bethune-Cookman for a couple of weeks. I'll give him that if you want to add him on the list. But even then, there have never been more than 3 of these type of coaches at one time. Never. Deion was there and Eddie George was there together. You had to go all the way until this year to where you got 2 more before you even got 1 more. So you're telling me Deion Sanders in 21, Eddie George 21, nothing in 22, nothing in 23. Now we get to 2024, going into 25, right? So you're talking about the 22, 23, 24 season, no new hires that fit this mold. Now we going into the 2025 season, and we have a couple of players who have now become head coaches. I don't want us to get up in arms. If you don't like it, that's fine. I'm not trying to convince you to like it. I'm not trying to convince you to like it at all. But what I'm saying is, let's not sit here and act like, because it's the one that gets me. These guys are taking jobs from coaches that really work their way up the ranks. Yes, there are examples of that happening, but not enough for it to become a narrative that this is what is happening. Not you look at the SWAC. It's none. It's none in the SWAC. You look at the MEAC. Now, it's a smaller conference, so if you go percentage-wise, technically a third of the conference has that. But Delaware State, Norfolk State, football-wise, we weren't checking them out. Anyway, this was something that I felt like really benefited them as far as platform, as far as recruiting, or will benefit them as far as recruiting, I should say. Eddie George on the independent ranks. I'll use the best way to really articulate why I think that this narrative is overblown. Why are people talking about NFL players with little experience becoming HBCU coaches this offseason as if they are the majority who are filling the vacancies? We had six vacancies in the HBCU landscape when we started off. North Carolina A&T, Delaware State, Norfolk State, Alabama A&M, Mississippi Valley, and Prairie View A&M. North Carolina A&T went with Sean Gibbs. Prairie View A&M went with Tremaine Jackson. Norfolk State had Michael Vick. Delaware State had Deshaun Jackson. Alabama A&M has Sam Shade. And Mississippi Valley State is still up in the air. So if I go through and I crunch my numbers, and I know I got to pull out the calculator, of all of the openings, specifically the 5 that have already been filled, there's 3 coaches who worked up the ranks. Matter of fact, to really hammer home how much of a overblown narrative this is about NFL players to HBCU and all of that, there's more Division II coaches who rose to the FCS level than there are players from the NFL who came to the HBCU level. What are we talking about here? When you really look at 5 vacancies have been filled this offseason. Sean Gibbs, Fort Valley State to North Carolina A&T. Tremaine Jackson, Valdosta State to Prairie View A&M. Sam Shade, Miles to Alabama A&M. But meanwhile, we want to talk about Deshaun Jackson and Michael Vick all the time. I talked about this on Christmas Day. Shout out to everybody who made me a part of your Christmas Day, whether you were listening before you opened the gifts or maybe you went back afterwards. I appreciate you. But what I spoke about on Christmas Day's episode, Division II coaches are the unwrapped gifts, or the unopened gifts of FCS football. Sam Shade shortly after came in, and he was named a head coach. That should be the conversation. I don't know if it's because people want to be angry, they want to complain, or maybe they like the flash, because there is a positive side of it, of the flashiness, because people are happy. It's not just people upset. I think this is what it is. People overblow it because if Morgan State lost their job, people overblow this narrative because if Morgan State lost their head coach right now, the first thing people say is go get Ray Lewis. If Texas Southern, well, they just got their head coach, but if Texas Southern, when they had a vacancy, people say, hey, we want to go get Andre Johnson. You want to talk about Bethune-Cookman. I think if Bethune-Cookman lost their head coach, Teddy Bridgewater be in the conversation. So I can talk about all of these players, but if it doesn't happen, you're getting upset about the idea of something happening. And I personally do not co-sign. I personally cannot sit here and get upset at the idea of something happening, at people having conversations about something happening. And I definitely will not treat the conversation about the action I oppose as if the action I oppose actually happened, because it didn't. It didn't. Yeah, like you can count on one hand, guys. You can count on one hand the people that you're talking about over the course of 5-6 years. Overblown narrative, unnecessary outrage, a little bit. I just think it's a tad bit exaggerated. The real conversation, while we wasted the end of 2024 talking about, well, look at this NFL player with little experience going to an HBCU, and how do we feel about this? While we wasted our time talking about this pipeline that we exaggerate how often they go to, we should have been talking about the fact that they're not trying to copycat this Deion Sanders mode as much. They're trying to copycat the Chennis Berry mode. Sam Shea goes from Miles to Alabama A&M, wins the SIAC championship, and moves on up within the state. Valdosta State makes it to a D2 championship, and now Tremaine Jackson comes back to the SWAC, this time with the rival Prairie View A&M Panthers. We should be looking at the fact that Sean Gibbs goes back to North Carolina A&T after leading Fort Valley State. We have three Division II coaches who have now gone to an HBCU on the FCS level. Two of those guys came from Division II HBCUs themselves. That should be the conversation. The D2 to FCS pipeline. Because in 2024, that's the pipeline that HBCUs have gone to the most frequently. But I understand it's not the flashiness. It ain't gonna make you upset. It's just a hire. Overblown narratives leaving in 2024. We're gonna push forward and look at an underrated, right? We talking about things that get talked about too often. This has been not talked about enough. And we're talking about the Lincoln, Pennsylvania quarterback who is now with Hampton. If you don't know him, let's get familiar with him as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and I just went on Game Time right now because I'm looking for some tickets to Monday Night Raw when they come out to Dallas. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a football game or a basketball game or a soccer game, right? It doesn't have to be these things. It's sports entertainment. I could go to a concert. I could go to a theater play. I could go to a ballet. I could go anywhere. I could go to the Improv. If they need tickets, I can go on Game Time. And if you're new to Game Time, maybe you haven't used it before because you thought I just had to be going to a sporting event. And I don't have any sporting events around me, or I don't have any sporting teams that I want to go to. My favorite team plays in the neighboring state. That's okay. You go to Game Time and take advantage of all of the other things that I laid out, whether it's entertainment, whether it's comedy, all of those things in between, music, movies, all of it. You just go ahead and go to Game Time, and when you use the code Locked On College, you get $20 off your first purchase. Make 2025 different and take advantage of Game Time. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the year. Woo! That sounds good. I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the year and every day of the year. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out my brother and sister shows. You got the Locked On ACC, Locked On SEC, Big 12, Big 10. It's conference time. Today, we're getting, well, actually, technically it started yesterday, but today we're really getting into the second round of the college football playoffs. So you want to make sure that we're checking out all of our conference shows to keep updated on that. I want to take a look at former Lincoln, Pennsylvania quarterback Isaiah Freeman, who is now going to be a Hampton Pirate. If you don't know about him, I'll give credit to my guy, Gerald Huggins. Y'all know Coach G. Good friend of the show, good friend of mine. He put me on to this guy, I'd say probably not last season, as in the 2024 season, but the year before that. So 2023. And that was the best year that Isaiah Freeman had. He was the player of the year. The year prior to that, he was the rookie of the year. And G told me, say, man, this guy is special. This is a special talent, and I can't wait to see what he's able to do in 2024. The odd thing about Freeman's 2024 is that they didn't use him nearly the amount that he used to be used. That's the confusing part to me. When I look at what Freeman did year one, what Freeman did year two, these are award-winning seasons. And then year three is not just that he didn't perform as well, he wasn't used as much. And we're talking about from a quarterback position. So we're not just talking about a wide receiver who maybe is getting double target or double covered now. We're not just talking about a running back who they're stacking the box or the offense is down. Like, we're not just talking about that. We're talking about a quarterback who is going to touch the field on every single, or is going to touch the ball on every single play. You know, like, that's important. So I wanted to highlight Freeman. We talked about Division II coaches going to the FCS ranks. Well, now we have a Division II quarterback who is going up to the FCS ranks, and he's going to Hampton. Let me break down and kind of internalize what I'm talking about with these numbers. We're going to go from his first year in which he won Rookie of the Year in the CIAA, and then we're going to go all the way to 2024 when he didn't even make an all-conference team. So as a freshman, Freeman has 1667 through the air, and he also had 382 on the ground. In total, he had 17 touchdowns, right? So 13 through the air, and then he had another 4 on the ground. Cool. That's a solid production. We like that from a freshman quarterback. Show me potential. Show me what you can do. The next year, he said, okay, I've shown you what I can do. Let me show you who I am now. I done had a year under my belt. I know exactly how to maneuver within this conference. I'm comfortable where I'm at. Now let me flash my skill set to I ain't gonna say his highest degree because you're still a sophomore, but at a very high level and put everybody on notice. That's what he did. As a sophomore, Isaiah Freeman for Lincoln had 2,319 yards. He had 25 touchdowns passing. Mind you, he had 17 total in his freshman year, in his rookie year, right? This time he has 25 through the air, and he adds another 6 on the ground. Cool. You're looking at a much greater player. He ends up getting the player of the year, and it's not like Lincoln was that good. Do you understand how good of a player you have to be to win your conference's player of the year and you not be great or you not be on a great team? That speaks volumes to the talent that Isaiah Freeman had. And I want to express that because we talk about ceilings in sports. We talk about potential. We talk about dips and peaks. We talk about all of these things in sports. You saw this with Isaiah Freeman. You saw a guy who came in at a high level and you say, oh, we know he has a high ceiling. Rookie of the year. This dude can be one of the best quarterbacks in this conference. Then he comes in the next year and not only is one of the best quarterbacks, he's the best quarterback. So that's as a true sophomore. Then he goes into his junior year and it's an absolute dud. It's not a good season. So you may wonder, why is Hampton pulling him up to the FCS ranks? It wasn't great. That's because you think you can get what you had in that sophomore year and just heighten it. What went wrong? Now, I'm not going to give you a full breakdown on what went wrong with Isaiah Freeman, but what I will say is look at these numbers. Freshman year, 1667. Sophomore year, 2319. Third year as a junior, 904 passing yards. He doesn't even reach the century mark. That's crazy. He had one game his freshman year with 19 attempts. That was his first game of the season. You're looking at his second game, right? Or excuse me, you're looking at his second year. He had one game with 19 attempts. Everything else is more than 19. So you're talking 20 and up from outside of that. In his last season, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games with 19 or less. 7 games with 19 or less pass attempts. To me, that is criminal. You go from 237 passing attempts to now 264 passing attempts, all the way to dip to 180. Maybe he's leaving these games early and I would have to go look at all of this, but the numbers are the numbers and that's what impacts it, right? So I would have to go study every single one, but he's not missing that much time. I'm looking at the weeks in between. He's not missing time in these games. So in general, I think that the numbers don't tell the full story because he's not a 900-yard passer. He's much better than that. I would say he's much better than that. And for Hampton, I like this pairing. It's interesting because Hampton was so close in a lot of games. They're trying to get over the hump in the CAA. Isaiah Freeman is trying to bolster his draft stock, trying to show exactly who he can be once again, just like he did his sophomore year. He's in that same place of, all right, now I got to show you exactly who I can be. He's going to have to do that against heightened competition in the CAA. He's going to have to do that with a team that they don't have a lot of wins in this new conference, but what they do have is a lot of competitive matchups in this past season. This one's going to be good. I can't wait to watch it. I really can't because there's a high level of intrigue in both parties, both Isaiah Freeman and then also the Hampton Pirates for their own individual trajectories, and now they're coming together. Give me that. Speaking of things I want, more games between the MEAC and the SWAC. Give me that. And I'm going to tell you why as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm looking at FanDuel as a chance, a new opportunity going into the new year. We know you spent a bunch of bread. We spent a bunch of bread on Christmas, and you're trying to make it back. You don't know how you're going to do it, but I do. And the way that you're going to do it is by going to FanDuel. It doesn't matter if it's the NFL. It's the last week of the regular season. We have games on Saturday and Sunday. Maybe you're listening to me early enough on the new year for you to get some action in the college football playoffs. Maybe you're not doing either one of those because, honestly, you're waiting for us to transition into basketball season. Then you could make some money on the NBA. Bron had his birthday the other day. Put some money on Bron today. Maybe he'll give you a gift. So it's all on you. What you going to do? Football, basketball, college, pro, soccer, tennis, whatever your cup of tea, whatever your persuasion is, you do that. Go to FanDuel.com, put down a $5 winning bet, and get $250 back in bonus bets. Go to FanDuel.com, get $250 back in bonus bets when you put down a $5 winning bet. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. What do I want more of in 2024? In 2025. I told you what I don't want to see. I told you things I want to leave in the past, things I want to erase. This was a statement for me to kick off the episode. False narratives must die. But you know what needs to gain some more legs? MEAC versus SWAC games. And I'm not just talking about the challenge. I'm not just talking about the Celebration Bowl. I'm speaking on just regular games. I don't see enough of those. I don't like. And here's the thing. Trash talk is such a big part of sports. The ability to sit there and just, like, for example, the Saints play the Buccaneers this week, and the Falcons need the Saints to win in order to make the playoffs. You can best believe that I'm going to call my boy Malik, and I'm going to tell him, you know you need us this week, right? I don't know what we're going to do, but it's the trash talk of your rival needing you. That's a part of it. I don't play on the field. I don't do that. I don't coach. I talk about sports as a profession, and I talk about sports as a hobby and as a pastime. Those are 2 different energies, but all of these things make it up. And why do I bring up that story? The reason I bring that story up is because the ability to talk trash between the MEAC and the SWAC is always going to be a driving force of HBCU athletics. It's as important to me as anything that's not literally on the field. You pick whatever you want to say that is not coaching or playing or practicing. You pick whatever aspects you want to discuss. To me, Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the mouth of the South Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire, that's important to me. I love the trash talk. When the MEAC says, yeah, we've been dominating y'all for years, I hate it. But when the SWAC gets to come back and say, yeah, we won back-to-back Celebration Bowls, I love that. I eat that up. So if we're talking about the energy that you get to see on social media, and you see it within conference, right? Like when Jackson State and FAMU play, it's back and forth. When Jackson State and Alabama State play, it's back and forth. When TSU and PV play, y'all may not see it, but trust me, it's back and forth. So you see these things. I love that energy. But when I get it between conferences, it's different. When you get it between conferences, it's teams that don't even like that team that's still going to claim what that team did because it's their conference. Southern don't give a crap about Jackson State. But I can promise you, if JSU is out here dominating Celebration Bowls, they're going to say the SWAC's dominating Celebration Bowls. I love that energy. I want to see more opportunities to get that energy out in the atmosphere. I had North Carolina Central versus Alabama State in the Orange Blossom Classic to kick off the year. Oh my God, that was amazing. I wish that I understood who South Carolina State was when they played FAMU, because I would have been even more hyped for that game. These are aspects that, do they affect the scoreboard? No, they don't. But you'd be lying to yourself. You would be lying to yourself if you said that doesn't entertain you. Man, I don't know, man. I actually have a friend who that doesn't entertain him at all. So I won't say you lying to yourself, but I'd be lying to myself if I said that wasn't the case, man. This is the bragging rights We know that it starts in Atlanta and it ends in Atlanta. But what about all the games that happen that aren't in Atlanta? Imagine if FAMU only lost to Jackson State. We about to stretch reality for a nice amount, right? Let's say FAMU only lost to Jackson State. They was running through the rest of the conference like they did back in the old days when they only lost to Jackson State. And then South Carolina State beats Jackson State. And now FAMU sitting here like, man, well, we beat the Celebration Bowl champions. Or maybe we don't even need that. If FAMU just doesn't tank the way that they did, and they're still a competitive team who seems like a solid contender, they can say, well, we beat the Celebration Bowl champions. And they may be able to say something of the sorts of, well, the two best teams came from the SWAC. It's Jackson State, FAMU, then South Carolina State. If we're talking just those two conferences, maybe you get to say those things. That opportunity isn't even on the table if the MEAC and SWAC don't touch until the Celebration Bowl. Matter of fact, give me competition between the middle of the conference. I don't just need the stars. Give me the competition between the middle of the conference. Give me a nice Alcorn versus Howard. Give me that. At the end of the day, if we could get 2 to 5 MEAC versus SWAC games, I would love that. I would love it. This year we got 2 outside of the Celebration Bowl and the SWAC and the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Outside of that, we got 2 of those games. You had the Orange Blossom Classic, and you have South Carolina State versus FAMU. This year, the Bulldogs will be playing the Wildcats of Bethune-Cookman. I wouldn't mind to see a team like Southern. Give me Southern versus North Carolina Central. Give me that, right? I think that these conversations, give me a Prairie View A&M versus give me Delaware State. You know, like give me Norfolk State. Give me that. No, I would love to see. Give me Alabama State versus Morgan State. People may hate that game. Could it be so defensive? Might not be any offense. Though I did mention that quarterback that just came to Alabama State. Watch out for Ragland. But the point is, I want these games between the conferences. It may not be all 6 MEAC schools that are going to play a SWAC school. But if you can give me 3 to 4 of them on any given year, and I'll include the MEAC SWAC Challenge in there, you give me 3 to 4 regular season games between MEAC and SWAC schools, I think that would just be so much fun. And when you have it on a regular basis, we don't have to judge, well, you know what happened in Atlanta. We can judge the entirety of the season and then compare our top dogs at the end of the year in Atlanta. That's what I would like. I know a lot of schools haven't put their schedule out. I know a lot of school schedule makers are not listening to me to decide what to do. But in case you know one and you want to suggest something, just say, hey, why we can't have more MEAC SWAC competitions? It's probably financially related. But y'all let me know if you got the answer to that. And that means you stayed all the way to the end. So in the meantime, between time, thank you. Tomorrow, unless something crazy happens, seriously, I've been saying this for a while, but I stopped promising because I knew things were going in, every which way. Jackson State season in review, January 2nd. That is the plan. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.